Good evening. Today is Monday the 13th of June 2022. The time is 8 p.m. in Canberra. We will begin the weekly Bangla radio program from Canberra 2XX Community Radio Station. This program is being broadcasted by the courtesy of Community Broadcasting Foundation Limited and Bangladesh Australia Association Canberra. Every Monday at 8 p.m, the program is broadcasted on FM 98.3 MHz. Tonight, the program is presented by me, Adiba Ahmed, and I'll be speaking about one of my hobbies, which is board gaming. I will also review a few that I own or have played in order of my current favorites. So, what are board games? I'm sure everyone has heard of at least Monopoly, but did you know that board games have become a very wide hobby that encompasses a variety of themes and playing options? They are usually games played upon a surface, also known as tabletop games to distinguish from video games, and they may use game pieces, cards, role-playing and or miniature games within the game. Many board games are played between 2 or more players, but there are also solo games, or the game itself may have a solo function with an automator. Sometimes the players are competing to win, or they may need to work cooperatively to solve the game. Some games have a variety of themes. For example, Monopoly is about money and the purchase and trade of properties. Another famous game is Cluedo, which is a murder mystery game where the players have to solve a crime using deduction. The game can be really simple, such as snakes and ladders. In fact, one of my sister's favourite games to date is Ludo, which I learned to play in Bangladesh as a child. My sister and I really enjoyed playing Ludo with our grandma. In fact, sometimes she was known to cheat, and we happily let her. In my research for tonight's program, I actually learned that Ludo is derived from the Indian game Pachisi. I also have fond memories as a child of carom boards. I never learned to play it properly, but I'm definitely on the lookout of possibly getting my own board. In Bangladesh, whenever I visited my family, I also learned how to play the card game Caption, which I realized later on in life is actually spades, and that section actually means spades trump. We love this game in particular in our family, to the point that we even have house rules. So if we play with our cousins and tell them that, hey, we want to play with house rules, that means we actually want to use the point system that my dad designed, because it's a lot more straightforward to implement than the typical game. I've always enjoyed board games growing up, but it was only in the last couple of years that I've really gotten into a more variety of games and learned about this booming industry. My current favourite top board game is Scythe, and Scythe is where my love began. My favourite cousin, I hope none of my extended family listen to tonight's program, but my favourite cousin visited us with his family from Sydney a few years ago. And on this particular trip, he brought his new board game, Scythe. As he carefully organised the setup of the game, I got more and more nervous. There are a lot of pieces inside, and it's a fairly large board game as well. It looked really complicated to me, and I was worried that I would not understand it. I'm not sure what other people might say, but I don't believe myself to be a competitive person. When I play board games, I'm not usually trying to win, but be present in the moment and enjoy the experience. My cousin, on the other hand, not only does he dislike losing, but he has come to learn that he really enjoys games where you can strategically sabotage the other players. I'm definitely not like that, but it is kind of fun to be a part of his playstyle, but not very fun to be his victim. Scythe is a beautiful and well-crafted game. Something that I have also realized about myself is that if a game is visually appealing, I am more likely to enjoy it. Scythe is set in an alternate history of the 1920s. Each player represents a character from one of 5 made-up factions of Eastern Europe who who are seeking to earn fortune and conquer territory on the map. Each player begins with different resources, different starting locations, and a hidden goal. Each faction in the game has its own strengths and weaknesses, which contributes to the asymmetry of the game and gives it more replay value, because as you sort of master each faction and work to their strengths to win, you get to try a new one in the next playthrough so that you're always having a new experience with Scythe. So factions move around the player board, also known as the map, to acquire land, generate resources, and combat other players. Scythe is an engine building game. Now what does that mean? Engine building games are a style of game where you are able to build an engine, that is, the series of decisions you take in the game will build an engine which starts to produce more and more either points or goods as the game progresses. From my experiences of playing board games, people who enjoy playing in a very strategic manner tend to enjoy engine building games more because they are able to think of multiple ways to build a really efficient engine that will help them win the game. I would rate Scythe as a medium to high complexity game. While it was my first foray into my adulthood love of board games, I would not recommend it as an introductory game. I was very lucky to have my cousin patiently teach me, but I would be way too intimidated to learn it alone as a beginner. My mum was so enamored with how beautifully crafted the game is that when I begged my cousin to let me borrow it until their next visit, Mum decided she wanted to learn to play and even was Googling the rule book during her lunch breaks at work. I also began to play the online version, which increased my expertise. Well, the little I have at least. While I do prefer the look and feel of tabletop board games physically, many popular games such as Scythe, Birmingham, Caption, as well as others, can have an online or video game version. The benefit I've found for playing these is that because they are less physically intensive, as in the movement of the pieces are typically automated, cards are typically automated, so the game tends to go faster or is just a bit less mentally intense because the computer is doing some of the thinking and actions for the players. And I'll use this to segue into talking about a specific program called Tabletop Simulator. Tabletop Simulator, or as it's also known as TTS, is an independent video game which lets players create tabletop games inside of a physics sandbox that does not have set victory and failure conditions. It is multiplayer, and the online multiplayer supports up to a maximum of 10 players. Several games come included in TTS, such as chess, checkers, and poker. Tables and pieces can be customized to create new games that can be saved and shared and played with others. TTS allows images and models to be imported to create entirely new pieces and tables, and this has meant that players have been able to recreate most real-world board games. Over 3,000 games and custom assets are shared at the Game Steam Workshop. While some are original games, many are adaptations of existing games. After selecting a table that they want to play on, players interact with the game and each other by spawning and moving virtual pieces, which are subject to physics simulation. TTS includes mechanics to assist with common styles of board game play, such as automatic dice rolling and hiding players' pieces or cards or money from one another. TTS is also funny in that it has situations where you can flick board game pieces, or even if you're frustrated, you can toss the table and throw away the board game. And this adds a bit of amusement to play. So sometimes when I play with my cousin and his family, just to annoy him, I might flick a couple of his pieces. I've only once actually tipped over the table when we were first learning how TTS works, just to see, but I think he would probably not play with me again if I was to actually get upset and toss the table in the middle of the game. TTS also allows players to save the state of the board as well as undo moves. Users have been able to recreate and play games that may not be in print anymore, or many users just have a preference for virtual board games rather than physical ones. My next favorite game is called Puerto Rico. This is another game that I learned from my cousin as well as mastered further online using the variant available to play free from BoardGameArena.com. So I think you can guess which game I bought the moment that I had some spare cash. That's right, it was Scythe. Wait, no. I wish I could have bought Scythe, but one downside to Scythe is that it is more on the expensive side. So instead, I bought Puerto Rico, and I have no regrets there. It had been my plan until COVID disrupted me to generate an interest of board gaming within my wider circle of friends. A couple of months ago, I had the opportunity to teach 5 friends how to play Puerto Rico, which is usually played between 3 to 5 players, but a 2-player variant does exist. As we were 6 people, I took on a self-imposed role of game master, and honestly, this was a way more enjoyable way to teach the game. Previously, when I tried to teach my wider family how to play Scythe as well as be an active player myself, that did not go down very well. With Puerto Rico and this opportunity, I had the chance to be impartial and suggest the best personalized strategy to each friend without interrupting my own game had I been a player. I would rate Puerto Rico to be a low to medium complexity game, tending towards more the medium level of difficulty, but definitely easier to understand than Scythe. My friends all enjoyed the game, and they were grateful for me as game master, and now Puerto Rico is one of our favorites to play. In the game Puerto Rico, players assume the roles of colonial governors of the island of Puerto Rico during the age of Caribbean ascendancy. It was the highest rated game on board game website BoardGameGeek.com for over 5 years, until it was surpassed by Agricola. The aim of the game is to amass victory points in 2 ways, by shipping goods and constructing buildings. Each player has a separate small board with spaces for city buildings, plantations, and resources. The players share the 3 ships on which the goods are shipped, a trading house, and the supply of resources and money, which is known as doubloons in the game. Players will accumulate plantation tiles over the course of the game, and they need to buy buildings that allow them to produce the goods coinciding with the plantation tiles. So for example, if you have a sugar plantation tile, you will need to buy the sugar mill in order to generate sugar. The generated goods can then be traded in the trading house for doubloons or shipped via the ships for victory points. Now don't forget, the winner of the game is the player with the most victory points, but shipping goods is not the only method in which to gain them, but I won't go further at this stage. I did want to speak about the fact that games can sometimes have some controversy, and this game had experienced some controversy that I did not know about until I had searched for a video to learn if I could teach the game in a better way. You see, one of the things that players also share is a supply of colonists whom are divvied up at certain points of the game and given to each player. Buildings and plantations do not work unless they are manned by a colonist. Colonists are represented by small, squat cylinders that are brown in colour, and some critics have said that they actually represent slaves. While I cannot make any claim as to what goes on in the minds of game creators when something is shared to the public, there is a significant chance that it will be evaluated and critiqued. The main message that critics have had can be summarized as this, that given the widely known history of Spanish colonization, it is disrespectful that slavery is not directly addressed in this game, even though players are essentially using slaves to generate the goods. From my own point of view, as someone who is not strongly educated in history, I had not made the connection between the brown colonists and slavery. I personally do not see it as a responsibility of a board game to provide this educational medium. However, it would not go amiss for games to acknowledge all sides of history, when creating their narrative. So while I did and still do enjoy playing the game, I do get a slight sour taste in my mouth when I think more deeply about its historical context. And now I'll start to head into games that I enjoy playing with my nieces. In saying that, I actually have tried to teach both of my nieces Scythe out of curiosity. They'll be turning 7 and 6 this year. My eldest niece was able to grasp a lot of the rules of Scythe, and with more time she should be able to pick up some of the finer details, but my younger niece, well, she was too impatient. But I was impressed regardless, because I've tried to teach Scythe to other adults, and sometimes it's gone right over their head. So the first game that I enjoy playing with my nieces is called Century Spice Road. I also enjoy playing it with my whole family, because there can be a strategic element to the game, which is a style that older players tend to gravitate towards. It's a quick game to pick up, and there is also an element of potential sabotage if you remain observant of the spices that your competition are trying to make blossom. What I like most is the quality of the playing tokens and the artwork of the game. There it is again, my love of visually aesthetic games. The coins are heavy and made out of some sort of alloy, and the resource tokens, well, at least in this game, the spice tokens are made out of wood. It's a tabletop strategy game that simulates 15th century spice trading. Each player is a caravan leader who travels the famed Silk Road to deliver spices to the farthest reach of the continent for fame and glory. There are 4 spices, and I'll describe them from least valuable to most valuable. Yellow cubes of turmeric, bright red pieces of saffron, intriguing green cubes of cardamom, and the most valuable in the game, cinnamon tokens that are a rich brown colour. Each player's caravan has 10 spaces upon which spices will sit. On the table, there are 2 rows of cards. The top row has 5 point cards and a draw pile. Each point card describes a specific configuration of the 4 spices alongside a number value. The aim of the game is to generate or upgrade to a matching configuration of spices as the point cards available. When you have those spices, you trade them in for the point card, and that numbered value becomes your points. The bottom row of cards are 6 market cards and a draw pile. Each card can do any one of 3 things: generate spices, allow trade of specific spices, or enable the upgrade of spices. By doing so, the player builds a hand of cards that enables them to collect or upgrade spices. Each player starts with the generate card that allows them to generate 2 cubes of turmeric, and the upgrade card, which allows them 2 upgrades. Upgrade cards can be used on any of the first 3 spices. As cinnamon is the highest value spice, it cannot be upgraded. You can, however, use a trade card to change your cinnamon into other spices. At each player's turn, 1 of 4 actions can be taken. You can establish a trade route, which is a fancy way of saying take a market card, trade or generate spices by playing a card from your hand. Fulfilling a demand is when you have those specific spices that a point card commands, you can claim that card, or rest, which is when you take back into your hand all the cards you had previously played. The game's conclusion is triggered when a player trades for their 5th point card, and the game finishes at the end of that round. The player with the highest number of points wins. But you may ask, Adiva, didn't you speak about beautiful heavy coins? Where are they? That's a great question. There are 2 types of coin in the game, gold and silver. Gold is worth 3 points and silver is worth 1. The number of players defines the number of gold and silver coins that will be a part of the game. Each leftmost point card in the top row will have 1 gold, and each second leftmost point card in the top row will have 1 silver until the coins run out. So while this game is pretty straightforward, there are little quirks like this that I really enjoy, because there is a good reason for why these coins are used the way that they are. They are like bonus points, and basically used to incentivize players to target the leftmost cards, because once they are taken, new cards can be dispersed from the draw pile. A similar idea exists for the market card row. The leftmost market card is free, but if you want any other market cards, you must pay 1 spice per card you skip on the left. So players are again incentivized to take the free card in order to keep the draw pile moving. Now sadly, I don't own this game, but it is one that my cousin lets me borrow often because he knows I enjoy it, and so does the rest of my family. It's definitely on my list of future games to buy. Another game that I enjoy playing with my nieces, and this one is their favourite game, I believe. It's called Tiny Towns. I would say Tiny Towns is of a similar level of difficulty to Century Spice Road, maybe even slightly easier. In Tiny Towns, each player is the mayor of their tiny town in the forest, in which the smaller creatures of the woodlands have created a civilization in order to hide away from predators. The new land is small and resources are scarce, so players have to take whatever they can get, and they can never turn down building materials. Mayors must cleverly plan and construct a thriving town without letting it fill up with wasted resources. The construction and strategic placement of buildings will earn players victory points. The winner of the game is the player who builds the most prosperous tiny town. Each town is represented by a 4x4 grid. Resources are denoted by coloured cubes, similar to Century Spice Road. However, the resources in this game are quite different and more representative of building materials rather than spices. There is blue glass, red brick, yellow wheat. Yes, I know what you're thinking. How do you build with wheat? And honestly, it doesn't make sense to me either. But I've never worked in the construction industry, so what do I know? I was thinking, would it be better if yellow was for straw? Like, for example, in the Three Little Pigs and how the first little pig built their house with straw? Yeah? No? Okay, moving on. Grey stone and brown wood. Very original. Now these cubes are made out of wood, but that's not all. All of the buildings that can be built also are physical tokens made out of wood, and there are 8 types. Cottage, well, factory, theatre, chapel, tavern, farm, and monuments. Any player can build any of these buildings. Players take turns to be the master builder, and the master builder decides which resource all players must take on that turn and place on their board. So if the master builder says glass, all players must take a blue cube and place it somewhere on their board. There are some minor exceptions. The game also includes monument cards, each of which requires a unique resource configuration that will provide a unique ability. At the start of the game, each player is provided with 2 monument cards. You select one and you return the other, and you keep that card a secret until you're able to build that monument, if so desired. Players must be careful where they put their resource cubes, because once that resource cube is placed, it cannot be moved. As additional resources are chosen, players need to form a pattern on their board to match the configurations on the building cards. When you have the resource cubes in the right order, you essentially trade those resources for that building token and place that building token on one of the tiles that were being occupied by one of the resource cubes. Not only do players have to be mindful of which resources to lay out to construct a building, they also need to ensure that the placement of the building tokens on the grid is optimal for scoring. The well, for example, is worth more points if it is built adjacent to a cottage. At the end of the game, players will total their scores using the score sheets provided with the game. Points are awarded for each building type, and points are deducted for having empty spaces, and the player with the most points wins. My nieces and I tend to like this because they really like being master builder, because when you're master builder you get to hold this cute little white hammer, and they sometimes like to rename the resource cubes to funny names, and that's amusing for them. I think they enjoy it because all of it is quite colourful, the artwork is really beautiful, and it's just very easy to pick up. The last game that I want to talk about is called Azul. Not only do my nieces enjoy this game, but my family does as well. It is another game that is very physically appealing, where the game has these tiles which are made out of a type of plastic. And I have this weird urge where I see certain things sometimes and I just have this urge to put it in my mouth. It's not a good thing. But I look at those pretty tiles and I think I just really want to bite down on one. So far I have restrained myself because I'm aware that I play this game with my family. The word Azul is Portuguese for blue, and this game is an abstract strategy board game based on Portuguese tiles called azuelos. Introduced by the Moors, azuelos, which were originally white and blue ceramic tiles, were fully embraced by the Portuguese when their king, Manuel I, on a visit to the Alhambra Palace in southern Spain, was mesmerized by the stunning beauty of the Moorish decorative tiles. The king, awestruck by the interior beauty of the Alhambra, immediately ordered that his own palace in Portugal be decorated with similar wall tiles. As a tile-laying artist, you, the player, have been challenged to embellish the walls of the royal palace of Evora. While this is the fun narrative of the game, it serves only as an illustrative backdrop, and there is little connection between the story and the gameplay. In Azul, players take turns taking color tiles from a repository or from the center of a table and placing them in a row, taking turns until all the tiles for that round are taken. When a row is filled, one of the tiles is moved onto a square pattern on the right side of the player board, where it garners points depending on its location in relation to other tiles on the board. The game is for 2 to 4 players, and each player's board has 5 by 5 squares to fill up. The player with the most points at the end of the game wins. I really enjoy playing Azul because it's a really fast-paced game, and also the tiles just feel really nice to play with. They're just like the coins in Century Spice Road. They're like hefty and it feels like something real. The tiles feel quite good in your hands as you're moving them around. So I really enjoy Azul. The scorekeeping is pretty simple. There's like a whole couple of rows where it's numbered and you have a little marker that just, as you score points, as you get your tiles on the right hand side and you're scoring points, you'll just keep adding your points with the little marker and going up the rows. So it's a pretty easy game to sort of pick up, and it's really it was quite easy for my nieces as well, and it's fun to play. So I thought an interesting way to end the program would be to advise of the rankings of complexity for these games. Board Game Geek is a very popular website that is updated by its large and growing user base. All of these ratings are out of 5. Scythe is rated 3.43, Puerto Rico is rated 3.28, Century Spice Road is rated 1.79, Tiny Towns is rated 2.07, and Azul is rated 1.77. So Azul is rated as the easiest to play and Scythe is rated as the hardest to play. None of these scores surprise me in terms of the order of the game's difficulty. However, I would say that Scythe's difficulty should be rated higher rather than so close to Puerto Rico's. I think there is a very noticeable increase in difficulty for Scythe. I think my takeaway message would be that while it appears to be the case that the more complex the game, the more likely I seem to be enjoying it, I would pivot and say that it's more likely to be the case that I choose to play a specific board game based on my specific mood and my potential playing partners. I still get a good kick out of playing Azul with my nieces as I do playing Scythe with my cousins, as I do playing Puerto Rico with my friends. The music clips used in this program were collected from tunetank.com. We've reached the end of our program. We hope that you've enjoyed. We invite you to send your opinion on Bangla Radio Canberra to the following email, banglaradio@gmail.com. You are invited to follow Bangla Radio on Twitter and Facebook. If you join our Facebook and Twitter group, we will send you our weekly program description. Our programs are archived in banglaradio.org.au website and on our new Bangla Radio Canberra YouTube channel. If you want, you can also listen to all of our previous programs anytime on your mobile device using Bangla Radio Canberra Listen app. This Listen app is now freely available from Apple App Store and Google Play Store. The next Bangla Radio program will be broadcasted on next Monday at 8 p.m. We welcome you to join us. Wherever you are, we hope that you stay well, in peace and happiness. Good night.